our regular Sunday strategy session, here for a special Wednesday session, a politically significant one. Kathleen Monk is a former Director of Communications to the late Jack Layton, Kory Teneycke was Ontario Premier Doug Ford's campaign manager and former Director of Communications for Prime Minister Stephen Harper. And Scott Reid was the former Communications Director to Prime Minister Paul Martin. Hi, everybody. Thanks for making the time for this. Scott, I'll start off with you because we had all been talking on the weekend about what this might look like. It feels like it does look largely like what we had anticipated, which is the Prime Minister lives to fight another day, but maybe not many more.
Well, it's very much left up in the air, in my view. I know the Prime Minister emerged saying, look, the party's strong and united. I don't know that either of those things are terribly supported by the facts. I mean, the party is not strong. They're still 20 points behind in the polls. There still is no plan to recover. That wasn't presented to Caucus today. That plan has not been presented really since those by-election losses in the summer. But more fundamentally, the party's not united. Let's be honest about it. When 1/5 of your backbench openly say, we'd like you to step down. Yes, the Prime Minister stared that down. His head didn't topple today. But that fact doesn't go away. The cold iron truth of it is that the party is agreed that it wants to defeat Pierre Poilievre. It is unclear where they come down when the critical question is asked, how are we going to do that? Do we do that with Justin Trudeau at the head of our party or not? That is clearly a point over which they remain divided.
Yeah, I just interviewed an MP, Kory, who basically said exactly that, right? Like, we are all able to unite on the idea that we have to defeat Pierre Poilievre, but he said the question of who will lead them into the next election, and this isn't one of the ones who voiced dissatisfaction, this is sort of a more agnostic MP, Ken Hardy. He said, like, the question of who leads them into the next election is an open one, and the Prime Minister, they expect, will reflect on that in the days to come.
I think that tells you a few things, right? That you had over 20 people who were willing to stand up and be counted in caucus saying they oppose them. One has to assume that the number is actually much larger. And if you had a secret ballot vote as opposed to a letter process and having to stand and face the music, I doubt he would do as well. And to Scott's point, not strong, 20 points behind, and not united. You've got a significant portion of your caucus in open rebellion and probably quietly supported by another significant portion of your caucus. And, and you got to wonder, even of those supporting the Prime Minister, how half-hearted is it? Like, are they supporting him because they feel a level of personal loyalty or because they actually do believe he is the best person to lead them into the next election? I think there's too many smart people in that room to believe the latter. Like, he is not the right person to lead them in the election. If you look at any of the public opinion polling that's out there, he is, in fact, the worst person to lead them into the next election.
I think part, though, of what is maybe taking some of the oomph away from those, Kathleen, who are voicing opposition to the Prime Minister's leadership is that they don't have the alternative ironed out, right? To Kory's point, and I heard that in the room, a few of the ministers who were defensive of the Prime Minister made that point over and over, like, okay, right. What's your plan B?
Yeah, okay, who would stand up? What's the heir apparent? There is no heir apparent right now. The only thing that was interesting about today was this deadline. The idea that they've actually realized that if they want to change leaders, they're going to have to do so soon. They have weeks, maybe months. They don't have a full year. So they have to move quickly. So the idea that they floated this October 28th deadline, that theoretically the Prime Minister is going to come back after his reflection and make a decision, they could potentially move on things up. But there's no mechanism. There's no Reform Act. It's not clear what the party process would be. There's this Code Red petition that's out there in the public, which is about Liberal Party members who are signing on to a secret vote to take out Justin Trudeau. But really, it's unclear beyond what's happening probably between the Chief of Staff, the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister, what the next steps are going to be.
I do think, though, that, Scott, when we are looking ahead at what might happen, particularly where that deadline is concerned, as Kathleen referenced, a number of MPs have told me to watch for that date. If, for example, they get a conclusive answer back from the Prime Minister that there is no, change ahead, that he will lead the party, that many of them will choose not to run, that they will announce they're not seeking re-election. And that, too, could have, in the aggregate, an impact on his prospects going forward, I think.
Right. I mean, the challenge we've talked about, there's no mechanism, there's no alternative. There isn't an instrument by which the Prime Minister can be removed. So all that's left is numbers. So what do they mean by October 28th? I don't know for certain, but your suggestion is a pretty compelling one. What if you have 24, 25, 30 members of Parliament who say, all right, well, if you're going to insist on running again, then we are not. And then you have what is a de facto massive resignation, a walking off the battlefield and taking off their sweater. That is not a good look for the government. That's not a good look for the Prime Minister. I'll say this again. Today hasn't actually settled any of these questions. The government wants to focus on Pierre Poilievre. The Prime Minister wants to say today offered them their chance to voice their concerns. Now this question's closed. It's not closed. It isn't going away. And it won't necessarily end on the 28th of October either. That's the challenge for the Prime Minister.
I also thought, Kory, it was interesting, again, from Ken Hardy, that his primary question leaving this was like, what is the value proposition that they plan to present to the electorate in the next election? That he said any minister that's told me, keep on keeping on is not satisfying the questions of caucus, and that question is a very live one for them. I think it's interesting that he's willing to say that like so bluntly out loud, and it's also interesting the Prime Minister didn't provide any kind of answer in today's caucus to his own answer, I guess, to that question.
Well, he's really not putting out anything else in the window. Like, where are the party advertising? Yeah. Where are they on that? Where are they on a compelling vision for where they want to take the country that isn't just not Poilievre? Like, I think, what is it that we're going to be doing differently to give us faith or some faint hope that things could turn around? But as long as it's more of the same on the menu, I don't think you're going to have a very happy caucus. It's cute that they think that this is somehow over or behind them or that they're united. But, as we know, it's going to be every day speculation about what happens on the 28th. And if the list of people opposed to him grows, if they're not satisfied in that window, there'll be more stories and more stories and more stories. You just can't get any other message out other than a message around leadership problems in this environment. So, how are you going to turn around if that's the sole narrative coming out of your government? It's very difficult for me to see a path.
Well, and that's why one of the last questions I had for Mr. Hardy, Kathleen, was like, is time really on your side? How much time do you feel you have? Because to Kory's point, and you've lived this too, like in previous iterations of different government, but like this is all anybody is consumed with right now. A, who's going to lead the party, and B, will the government even survive? Like there's going to be an immigration announcement tomorrow. That might be the first policy discussion in 6 weeks that we're going to have.
And there was a major rate cut today for the bank, which brings tons of relief to Canadians, and we're not talking about that at all. Like the fact that inflation is dropping, the fact that the interest rates have dropped enormously, and all of these things are not on the agenda until this is solved. But what I wonder about is, what is the mechanism for the Prime Minister to deliver his message back, his decision back to caucus? There's no scheduled meeting. Is it just going to come from a letter? Here I decide. Are they going to have a little get together on the weekend? What is going to happen? So I actually think that it's almost unrealistic what the timeline that they put on him, and I don't understand how the Liberal Party, will get together and decide how to move forward logistically, who the leader is going to be, what the mechanism is. It's all the next 5 days. That's all we're going to be talking about.
Well, there's lots to watch for and lots for us to discuss this weekend. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate you making the time for this discussion. Scott Reid, Kory Teneycke, and Kathleen Monk.